Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for another exciting edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. I'm excited to be the facilitator for tonight, and I'll be talking around a topic, gender responsive human resource management. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be looking at this topic in detail, but just for the benefit of a few people who may just be getting in touch with me for the first time or getting to hear me speak. I have been in the HR space for over 22 years now, worked in a couple of organizations, couple of industries, and I've worked also in the academia. I've done quite a couple of research around gender, around women in the workplace, and around the general HR value chain, among others. I'm excited to be here, and we'll be looking at the topic together. At some point, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to chime in to contribute your thoughts, share your experience, your knowledge on this very important subject matter. First and foremost, let's look at a few statistics around gender. Okay, as of 2023, women held 28% of managerial positions globally. Okay, this is worldwide now. And this underscores the need for targeted HR interventions to improve female representation in decision-making body. Now, as HR professionals, our workforce typically comprises of men and women. If you look at the general population data, rough estimate now, very rough estimate, we can easily say we have a ratio of 50 to 50 men and women. This is across all the various job roles, occupations, professions. Of course, fully aware that in certain job functions, for example, when you look at fields like engineering, you may now find that it may be heavily skewed towards more men than women. But on the aggregate, when you're not looking at any particular specialization, you will have a lot of women available, especially at the entry level. But as you begin to go through the hierarchy of the organizations, relatively women begin to turn out. Again, generally speaking, another important statistic or data I would like us to look at is that women are 25% less likely to be promoted than their male counterparts. Again, this is despite similar qualifications and performance levels. Very recently, I was interviewing a senior woman, in a major organization here in Nigeria, and she told me how she put her name forward for a training. And she also put the name of her subordinate, who incidentally happened to be a man, for the same training. And she was surprised when she got a feedback that they selected only a subordinate, a man, and they didn't select her. So she tried to make inquiries, just to find out, what's the justification? Why aren't you sending the two of us? I was the one who found this training. I found it's very useful, and I put myself forward, and of course, I also put forward my colleague. They say, you are a woman, and the date is not yet fixed. A man can just easily travel and go for the training and spend like 2 weeks. There won't be any problem. He said, is that your call to make on my behalf? Why don't you at least touch base with me, have a conversation that maybe this is the date of the training, or perhaps the date of the training is uncertain. Will it be convenient for you? That is an example of a training. Guess what? If you miss 1, 2 trainings like that because you're a woman, if you miss 1, 2, 3 job postings or rotations, you don't, they just assume you are not occupationally mobile just because you are a woman, and probably just because you are also married. These things lead to other, so to speak, missed opportunities. Again, with respect to retention challenges, 43% of women consider leaving due to lack of advancements. 43% of men. This statistics emphasizes the importance of implementing retention strategies that addresses gender-specific needs. All right, so moving forward, very quickly, I would like to talk about gender-responsive human resource management. However, let me say one or two things still around the same spectrum, okay? So gender-responsive human resource management involves the deliberate design, intentional design, and implementation, okay, of HR policies, HR practices, and systems to address gender disparities in the workplace, to help promote equity between access of men and women to occupation and career progress and growth, and also to create an inclusive environment. This is very, very important. All right. In addition to this, I'd like to also add here that the most likely positioning of most organizations, management, and HR today will at best be gender neutral. Some are actually even gender blind. By gender blind, I mean many managements, many HR in many organizations completely ignore the different situations, roles, needs, and interests of women vis-a-vis men. They just come up with policy and assume it is a level playing field, level playing ground, and it will impact or have consequential impact on men and women the same way. This may not necessarily be true or correct because men and women are different. Now, some even say, oh, may not necessarily be gender blind, but they are what? Gender neutral. And for management or HRs that are gender neutral, they recognize these gender differences, but they do nothing about it. Okay? A gender neutral HR policy is not affected by, does not affect the different situation, roles, needs, and interests of women or even men as distinct individuals or personality. A gender neutral HR policy will likely produce undesirable outcomes for certain groups of people, particularly vulnerable groups, sometimes women. So when we are talking about gender responsive HRM or human resource management, we are looking at human resource management policies, programs, okay, that consider and address different situations, roles, needs, and interests of women, and of course, as men. Sometimes we can also say, instead of gender responsive, we can also say gender sensitive human resource management. Okay, they literally, basically mean the same thing. So gender responsive human resource management is an approach, okay, that integrates gender consideration into all aspects of human resource practices and policies. This strategy aims to what? Promote gender equality within the organizations by ensuring that both women and men have equal opportunities, rights, and access to resources. Generally speaking, once we mention gender, the average person just think about women. For obvious reasons, to some extent, they've been the largely disadvantaged gender. And you will agree that some of the reasons are not far-fetched. Either historically, men have been the primary breadwinners, while women have been primarily designated as caregivers. But you will agree that in the last 50 years, even in this part of the world, there has been a tremendous shift. So ab initio, historically, the workplace had been built around the industrial man. Man as a gender now, not man and woman. You know, sometimes when you say man, you mean men and women, but man as a gender now. So historically, on the manufacturing dispensation, so a lot of policies, the people making the policies were men, the people who were making the policies for were men, and a lot of this has been subtly brought forward maybe not maliciously. However, there is the need to re-evaluate, to reassess our policies at the workplace from a genderless. Very, very what? Very, very important. Very, very important. All right. Now, some of the challenges that female employees encounter albeit at various degrees, various levels in different places. But this is like a summary of the key highlights. Gender stereotypes and bias. For example, assuming that there's a role, a management role, but in another geography, they just by default assume the woman cannot go because of her husband or family and children. But they think the man can just go. It doesn't need permission. Or the people in the man's life or world will adjust easily. Stereotyping. Thinking, oh, this role, maybe a senior executive role, is best suited for a woman. If you ask why, they say, oh, that role, they may need to be closing late. Why the matter of closing late is another conversation for another day with respect to work-life balance. Who told you some women or many women don't close late? Why should you make a call on behalf of the woman without engaging with her, without giving her the opportunity to either accept or reject the role based on the terms and conditions? You will say, oh, you don't have, women can't do politics. Say why? Say because they meet at night. Again, we ask, why must we meet at night every time? Do we meet at night because predominantly we've been men, and so we are not caregivers, and so we can get home at any time? Must we continue to meet at night and therefore subtly disenfranchise 50% of the population? What we are saying is we shouldn't make assumptions. Gender stereotype, don't think, even let's take it one step lower. Some of us, we subconsciously groom our daughters. We say, oh, you should be a nurse. Then we groom our son and say, you should be an engineer. What if the son wants to be a nurse and the daughter wants to be an engineer? Even from the kind of toys that we buy for our children, we begin to subtly prep them and stereotype them in certain ways. Again, one of the feedback we've gotten from experience, from research, from interaction with women generally is the seemingly inadequate or insufficient mentorship and sponsorship. There's what we call the boys club. And this boys club, literally speaking now, for example, men go, typically, we have more men who hang out, especially after work. Again, the women have to run home very quickly to go and cook and take care of their children and support the family, while the men don't have this obligation. So you will see that beyond what happens between 8 to 5, a lot of things happen after 5 that have impact on 8 to 5. People's competencies unofficially is determined at the table in the staff club where there are only men. So you already have, so to speak, more visibility, access to different people that can maybe sponsor you, that can mentor you, that can guide you, that can coach you. Again, this is of course not recent. Many of us either know somebody that has been affected, either a family or a friend. Workplace harassment and discrimination. A friend of mine told me one time that anytime she's in the lift in a particular workplace, she doesn't want to enter the lift alone because there was a particular senior official in the organization that want to group her inappropriately in the lift in broad daylight. Harassment at different levels, from you won't be promoted if you don't go down with them, to you'll be frustrated, to in giving you excessive workload just to make you to succumb. Of course, that's not to say that sometimes men are not a victim of this kind, but disproportionately, women are affected negatively when we talk about workplace harassment and discrimination. Even in the place of recruitment. Some people say, no, it's a man I want to. If you hire the woman now, she may get married or she may become pregnant. Discrimination. Sometimes we also design our work in such a way that the work-life balance support is not there. we create a workplace, and let me say this, in the past, the banking sector was almost like that. When you almost close late permanently every day. So a woman now has to make a choice that, do I want this profession or do I want to raise children? The women gender don't have to be put in this kind of difficult situation, especially on a continuous, ongoing basis. Sometimes too, the organizational structure and the culture, when a lot of people will say, oh, when are we meeting? Conveniently, they will just say, let's meet 7 p.m. What kind of culture is that? I'm not saying you can't meet 7 p.m., but why should that be your default management meeting every week, 7 p.m. every Monday in the evening? What happened to work hours? If you start doing work hours and it spills over, that's a different ballgame. If there are emergency meetings and situations like that, that's a different ballgame. But why should our standard meeting time be 7 p.m. at night? What kind of culture is that? If there are women in that particular organization, would they aspire to grow to the pinnacle of their career? Because we are trying to say, if you grow in your career, you are trying to take some other aspect of their life that is equally valuable. Again, there may be limited career development opportunities. Maybe there are extended training programs, courses, workshops. You just assume that the women cannot go for a long time away from home. And then you don't even consider them for the training. Sometimes it may be the issue of lack of gender-specific policies that enable, that encourage, that support, that equip women. Again, another challenge encountered by female employees is by the women or by ladies themselves. Of course, men can also have this challenge. Imposter syndrome, where when there is a vacancy ahead, for example, if there are 10 men and 10 women on the same level who are eligible and can apply for that senior role, guess what? Chances are more of the men who apply. They will have this natural confidence that they may get the job. They can get the job. It's not unusual for some women to be second-guessing themselves, to be thinking, will I be good enough? Will I be able to cope? Will I be able to deliver? Last but not the least, social economic factors. Okay, things like in the economy, the way our society is structured generally. For example, in this part of the world, we are largely patriarchal in nature. So if a child is sick, for example, almost by default, the mother has to go and pick the child at school. Why not the father? Just asking. Why can't either of the parents or whichever parent is closest to the school go and pick him? Or I'm not talking necessarily about an infant now, but it's just by default. If there's a PTA meeting, I remember a few years ago, I went for a PTA meeting. We were like 45 in that PTA meeting. We were only 2 men. Where were the other 43 fathers? 45 parents in a PTA meeting, only 2 men. And you needed to see the special attention they gave with the 2 men. In fact, we felt embarrassed. See what our agenda has done to us. We think once we pay the school fees, that's all. No, not I beg to differ. I beg to what? Disagree. These are some of the social economic factors. And we need to realize that when, for example, economic indices, situations are tough, inflation, cost of living, those kind of things, it disproportionately affects women relative to what? Men. So there are certain principles, quite a number, but we'll just touch base around some. So concepts like equity and inclusion, okay, things, concepts around policy development, workplace culture, and thank God, more increasingly in recent times, flexible work arrangements. And when we are talking about flexible work arrangements, it's not just about remote versus on-site or remote, hybrid, and on-site. Okay, and I've seen this in organizations, but maybe a few more of us need to open to it. For example, if you even have to work on site, let's assume you have to work on site, must the work be 8 to 5? So the work could be, for example, you are able to drop your children in school, you resume at 9, Then maybe around 1, you go and pick your children at school, maybe take them home, then come back at 4, and then work till 8 or 9. That's still flexible working hours. And you still did everything on site. Or you do part of your day on site, the remaining part of the day off site. Flexible work arrangement. I know somebody will say, oh, my MD, my management is, because sometimes we always pitch just exclusive on-site and off-site or hybrid. We need to be able to accommodate special circumstances around women. So funny enough, some of these circumstances apply to men. Men just bone face, I don't know the correct English for that. They just pretend as if they don't care and put all the burden on their spouse. Okay. Let's quickly look at some tiny tips. Okay. Some of these tips may be funny, but forgive me. I intentionally brought this to the fore. I remember some few months ago, I was having a conversation with a lady. And the lady asked me that when you go to the toilet, what do you see there? Typically. I said, tissue. The lady asked me, said, HR, why don't you guys provide sanitary pad in the toilet? The same way I'm looking at you right now, person, that was the look on my face. So I said, let me bring up some small ideas for consideration. You don't have to embrace everything, and you don't have to embrace anything, but it may also trigger some ideas. And I'll be glad, ladies and gentlemen, if you can drop in the chat box some simple ideas that we can bring forward to support men. Now, let me quickly take a pause and read 1 or 2 comments that I see in the chat box. Coach Daniel said, correct, gender stereotype is driven by overtime and covert cultural expectations and grooming. Men and women are psychologically boxed into a predetermined behavioral pattern. HR needs to see things using a gender prism, restructure policies and practices in the workplace. We need more gender warriors in the HR profession. And of course, somebody gave a love emoji to that. Coach Daniel, thank you for that apt contribution. I love it. So some tips before we go back to some mainstream conversation. For example, whether you rent the office building or you build the office building, depending on the scale and size of your organization, would you consider having nursing rooms? Designating a private, comfortable space for nursing mothers to pump breast milk so that they don't need to go to the toilet to do it or go to the cafeteria and then sit in a way that they are trying to obstruct the view of other people. Do you want to, for example, consider stocking menstrual pain relief options, basic pain relief medications for menstrual cramps in the office? It may not be in the first aid kit. Some people say first aid kit has some specific items. Maybe a special kit. Do you want to consider it? Or do we want to assume or pretend that we've not seen any of our female colleagues having cramps and maybe they didn't prepare for it upfront and don't have medications? Do we want to consider breastfeeding support, for example, offering a dedicated refrigerator for storing breast milk safely and hygienically for nursing mothers? Do we want to consider maybe creating comfortable sitting areas where women who may need a break during pregnancy or during menstruation can go and rest? Do you want to create childcare facilities? At least this is slightly more popular. Thank God to some champions we had in the banking industry and some other organizations that began to provide daycare facilities. Do you want to consider having maternity parking spaces, like designated parking space for women close to the entrance so that women can have easy access to the office and out of the office? Of course, in this context, only for pregnant women. Do you want to have healthy snacks, ensuring the availability of healthy snacks, which can be particularly helpful for pregnant employees needing frequent balanced meals? Our fitness programs, do we want to consider offering special dedicated wellness programs tailored for women, such as prenatal yoga, or pelvic floor exercises. I dare say that some men on this call may be hearing some of these words or terms for the first time in an HR conversation. The women know about it because they are women. Again, please, in the chat box, drop some of the ideas that you think is doable, can be easily achieved. Okay, thank you so much. Blessing says, allow women who have this menorrhea work from home during those times. You can have a special leave for that, and nobody will be judged because of something that is medical or biological or physiological, as the case may be. Thank you, Stephanie Eze. She mentioned a crèche, which is the same as the childcare facilities. As ideas pop up in your mind, please do not hesitate to drop it. Now, moving on, I intentionally brought those ideas early. Okay, flexible work hour arrangement. Some organizations, for example, have 16 weeks of paid parental leave. Thank God, even for the government now, they do like 6 months in Nigeria. You know, flexible work arrangements, remote work. You know, for example, a particular organization introduced a gender balance scorecard to track and promote women's advancement into senior role. So look at that, the name of that document, gender balance scorecard. Do you want to consider that in your organization? Some organizations, for example, have developed a sponsorship program to help women advance into leadership programs. So, you know, generally you can have a leadership development program. Then you can have a leadership development program specifically, exclusively, intentionally for women. You can also, for example, have and enforce a zero tolerance policy for harassment, discrimination, with clear reporting procedures and fast-tracked treatment of reported cases. Quick dispensation of justice. You may want to consider providing support employee resource group for women, especially where they are in the minority. So maybe an engineering firm, women in engineering. You may have some special benefits. Maybe bring senior women engineers, maybe even outside the organization, occasionally to come and provide a pep talk on how they rose and grew quickly in their career. Do you want to consider, especially as part of your ESG or part of your annual report, to be providing gender diversity metrics annually? And do you want to have a target of when you will have a gender balance or of some sort, or have an improved gender ratio? If 50-50 is a tall order, do you want to move from 20%, 20-80 to 40-60, for example? Do you also want to consider special additional healthcare benefits for women? When you are negotiating and engaging with your HMO, do you just negotiate HMO for employees, or you negotiate for men and women, knowing that men and women, and it goes beyond maternity? Ladies and gentlemen, are you picking something? Do you want to consider the tone of our job advertisements? You take some advert, you just be seeing E, as if it must be a man, not she. Or why not introduce gender neutral advertisements? And we check that even our policies is neutral, doesn't connote E, as if E is by default the reader of the policy. Do you want to consider blind resume reviews, anonymous coding challenges? Do you want to consider implementing standardized salary structures to ensure equitable compensation? And I know there is something around the salary, and I will say it tonight. Now, most organizations we engage with, they will tell you that we have a salary scale and we don't discriminate between men and women. But guess what? Where the subtle discrimination will come. Generally, and this may also relate to with imposter syndrome, if you notice, men tend to negotiate higher than women. It's easier for men to ask for 100% review, 200% review, while for women. Also, when men are negotiating, the other people at the end of the panel may tend to want to accommodate the request of the men. They will say, oh, he has bills to pay, he will pay school fees, he will pay rent. When a woman is asking for a paltry 50% review, in their mind, what does she want to do with the money? So as HR, consciously or unconsciously, when you are negotiating salary or compensation with a man, is your positioning and stance the same as when you are negotiating with a woman? Yes, your payroll or pay scale doesn't differentiate between men and women, but there are things we do directly and indirectly. So do you even want to conduct, say, annual pay audits and adjust salary to ensure equal pay? Maybe, especially if you've been in the same organization for 10 years, 15 years, do you want to check the men and women that enter together? What's the ratio of their promotion? Don't tell me the men all worked harder than all the women in the organization. Please don't go there. Don't let us go there. Ladies and gentlemen, what are you considering? Let me quickly take a pause here, but let me add quickly that do you have training programs and training budgets for women? Do you have mentorship programs for women in leadership? Now, I'll read again very quickly some of the very fascinating and interesting contributions in the chat box. Again, I crave your indulgence if you're in a position to type right now. Please share your thoughts. It will enrich this presentation. This is for all of us. All right. Coach Daniel says here, ideas for consideration. Always include women are encouraged to apply for all jobs advertised from or by your company. Ensure we have a gender-balanced interview panel for recruitment and promotion. In other words, if you have I was about to say man, but for the context of this conversation, 4 people panel, you get 2 men, 2 men. Because when you have a 4-man or 4 people panel, all of them are men. How do you think they will respond and treat women who are the candidates? And this applies both for recruitment and for promotion. Are we together? Okay. Thank you so much. So create a staff club that can open between 4 and 6 so that women who also double as caregivers can have a fee if they so desire. Okay, it adds there that have a gender equality policy, very important. Organize job fairs, for example, in universities, polytechnics, tertiary institutions, specifically targeted at women. Okay, ensure with respect to your internship, your NYC intake, you do like a 50-50 male-female ratio. You got to be intentional. Thank you again, Coach Daniel, for that. So some of these additional strategies is training and development. You see, there's one training we call unconscious bias. Okay, and all of us have our own prejudices, no matter who we are. It may be positive or negative, hardly neutral anyway. But we need to train employees, managers, supervisors as to how not to be biased towards women. What are the kind of phrases, words, expression, what are the kind of questions not to ask? We need to provide, like we're having this webinar tonight, this is a gender sensitivity training. You will see that after today, for all of us, our disposition towards women will go a notch higher. I know some of us are probably on 80%, you go to 90%. Some of us are on 20%. Hopefully, you get a quantum leap to 60%. You get what I mean? Because this is conscientizing our conscience, trying to get us to reason, think about women in a different light, and be intentional in providing support for them. You also need to get leadership commitment. Leadership must demonstrate a commitment to gender-responsive HRM, human resource management, promoting and participating in what initiatives aimed at achieving gender equality. This thing must go beyond just doing International Women's Week. We hype, buy small chops, do photo shots, and then end it there. No. Stakeholder engagement. Involve employees in discussions about gender policy and foster a sense of ownership and accountability towards equality and goals. Now, let's look at a public sector example. You know, when we do our webinars, it's instructive that we generally have 2 or 3 or more classes of people. We have people in the private sector. We have people in the public sector. So sometimes I'm intentional to also bring in public sector. So this is a situation, for example, in a country not too far away from us in West Africa here, also Anglophone, Liberia. Okay, they came up with an initiative where, even though leveraging on merit-based recruitment policy, they mandated a 30% quota for women. And this generally has improved what? Female representation across different sectors in the government. And they also paid attention to retention strategies, especially post maternity and career development programs. So even in the government space, we have to be what? Intentional. Okay. Thank God for the many women who have set and braced tails. Thank God for the Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala of this world. Thank God for late Dora Akiri. They've done phenomenally well. Excel so that it's even almost difficult for the average man to even catch up. So we've spoken around flexible work arrangements, mentorship programs, then gender audit. So part of the things about this gender audit is you also report it. You report it. Okay. I see one or two comments I'll quickly like to take. Thank you so much, Madam Stephanie. She says, yeah, especially when you're a young woman, okay, and you believe you don't have, when you're a young woman, everybody believes you don't have responsibilities. Exactly. They think you just use your money for makeup, jewelry, and dressing. And that's stereotyping. Of course, it doesn't even concern you what anybody use their money for. But don't limit their earning potentials or capabilities based on your assumptions. My sister Ajoke Omotaro says women should treat their career intentionally. If you don't have a career destination, everywhere will seem like your bus stop. Have a list of your career expectations. Grow or go. Very beautiful, well worded, waxing philosophical there, but on point. Janet says that women should also learn to take the bull by the horn. I've argued with a hiring manager who refused to accept a female candidate, but eventually bowed to my argument because all his staff were men. Can you imagine? In a department, all of them are men. A gender audit, we pointed that out. When the female candidate realized she was the only female among them, guess what? She refused to accept the offer. Imposter syndrome. Thinking, how will I be able to cope? Will I not suffer harassment or intimidation? Or will all of them not be working extra late consistently and expect me to do so? And if I don't do so, will they not think I'm not patriotic or I'm not committed to the work? Let's keep this beautiful conversation going, please. Some of the benefits include enhanced organizational performance, attraction and retention of what? Talent, compliance with what? Regulations. Now, let's quickly move to how do we support women specifically? How do we support them, especially from entry to C-level? Now, I would like to say here that every employee, generally, we need the various HR support and intervention across the different career life cycle, maybe entry level or junior level, middle management, and senior management. Women are not left out, so, this is a mental, so that you can flow mentally with me now. So on the average, this is an average, there are exceptions. There are people who are fast, there are people who are so, but on the average, you may say, oh, when women are at the junior entry level, maybe, just maybe they are single, some may be married. Then by the time they are getting married and then they are going to middle management, then the demand of family, children begin to take a toll. So you need to have this kind of appreciation to also see the kind of intervention. Don't forget that your job as HR, you are trying to help the women in the organization to go, just like you are trying to help the men to go. And you know that sometimes the programs that help men to go may not necessarily help women to go sometimes. Okay, so some of the things we've already spoken about, for example, bias-free hiring speaks to entry, inclusive onboarding. So when you are doing onboarding, just imagine you are onboarding only women. Is your onboarding deck doing justice? I'll say that again. Just imagine for a moment that you are onboarding only women to the organization. Have you addressed all their concerns? Have you provided all the information they need to grow in that organization? Is your onboarding deck masculine or feminine? or masculine and feminine combined? Did you consider the two genders? Also, skill development, providing access to entry-level what? Training programs focused on foundational skills and career readiness. With respect to mid-career, you may be considering breaking the glass ceiling. Career advancement programs, design targeted upskilling programs to prepare women for middle management role, including technical and leadership training. Again, things like intentional mentorship and sponsorship. Pair women with senior mentors who can offer career advice and sponsors who can advocate for them. Networking opportunities. Create platforms where women can connect with peers, leaders, and industry professionals. Let me quickly chime in here and say this. So I've seen instances, maybe people in a certain category, maybe senior manager, hypothetical now, maybe they are all eligible for club membership. HR check. If you have 10 senior managers, 5 women, 5 men, chances are all the men will enroll for that club membership. Check the women, maybe only 1 or 2 will enroll. As HR, get the other 3 to enroll and get them to use that club membership and be visiting or going from time to time. Because things happen in the club. The organization is not sponsoring club membership for the fun of it. It's a veritable networking platform. Are we together? Again, let me quickly read this comment from Gloria. HR managers have a responsibility to be pushed through when it comes to hiring women. My MD recently told me that he would rather have a male pharmacist than a female one in one of our pharmacies. Meanwhile, I have already interviewed and recommended a lady for that position. His claim, please, stereotyping, his claim was that men are more rugged. Says who? Is the job boxing? Even if there is boxing, we have male boxing and we have female boxing. You are not going to tell a man to box a woman. Okay? I argue that the pharmacist does not require physical strength to prescribe drugs for patients. I was pushful until he gave in. That is why we are having this webinar tonight. That is why anybody who stumbles on this webinar on YouTube, Oluyemi Adeosun, that's why you are watching it, to receive the capacity, the courage and grace to be put through. So there are things we need to what? Fight for, ladies and gentlemen. Leadership training. Offer advanced programs in strategic thinking. So what are the things that fences women out? Let me quickly share this story here. I was engaging with a guy, a senior guy now, a man, senior man. Guy may not be very correct in this context. A man, senior man. And he told me something. And I checked through my HR experience and I could validate what he was saying to a large extent. He said, relatively speaking, please pay attention to this. Women are more stable in terms of retention in many organizations. So take banking. Chances that a woman will stay with one bank for a long time is higher than chances that a man will stay with one bank or the same bank for a long time. So take the average 20-year banker career. The man, this is an assumption, please. The man might have worked in 5 banks in 20 years. The woman might have worked in 2 banks. Guess what? Shouldn't we be grateful and thankful for the women? But the man will now have better industry experience than the women. So when he now gets to maybe a C-suite opportunity, the man that has worked in 5 banks will have a slightly higher chance of doing better in the recruitment process. Are we paying women for their loyalty by denying them access to C-suites? So that is why we are saying leadership training. For example, strategic thinking, decision-making, executive presence, tailored to women leaders. Many of us today will say we have succession plan in place. Please, if you do a gender analysis of your succession plan, what's the ratio of women to men? Please don't tell me that there are not many women in the pipeline, because you won't have if you've not been hiring many women in the first place, or have not been supporting them to transition from junior to middle and from middle to senior. How do you treat women when they become pregnant, when they go for maternity? How do you help them to come back? In the year they are on maternity, do you have policies or concept that will say, oh, you can't appraise them for that year and they lose that year because they didn't do a full year? Are we fair towards them? Talking about visibilities and opportunities, do we assign them high impact, high priority projects? do we give them speaking opportunities so that they can raise their profile? How many times do we let women go and represent the MD or the CEO, as the case may be, outside the organization, when they are interfacing with the regulator, when they are interfacing with different stakeholders? Ladies and gentlemen, work-life balance. We've spoken a lot around this work-life balance, psychological safety, zero tolerance for what? Discrimination, and so on and so forth. We've also spoken about recognizing and addressing biases, providing access to resources, women-centric employee resource groups. Okay, let me see if I can share a few more tips or insights before we call it a wrap today. It's very important that leadership accountability is held onto. We need to track. We need to have gender metrics to monitor recruitment, retentions, promotions, and representation across levels. Your board, what's the female-male ratio? Your management, what's the female-male ratio? So we need to have advocacy with the C-suits, ensuring senior leaders champion diversity. And we're not talking about paying lip service. Also, we're not talking about tokenism. You just put a woman there, but that woman doesn't have a voice. Or you put two women there so that you can say, we have women on the board, though. Do those women actually have a voice? Can they shape the opinion? Can they guide policy direction? Then, how do we celebrate the milestone and achievement of women in the workplace so that we can reinforce positive outcomes? How do we partner in the industry? You know, there are certain networks, just to mention maybe one or two. You have, for example, WIMBIS, Women in Business and Leadership. And most sectoral bodies, you will have the women wing of the maybe MBA, women wing of Korean, and so on and so forth. Find out. Even in industries that are predominantly male-dominated, you will have women sections. Can you link up with them, bring them or work with them to support women in your organization? Do you want to also look at community engagements, like scholarship for women, internship for women, mentorship for women, especially young women in the tertiary institution? Ladies and gentlemen, there are quite a number of things we can do. There are quite a number of things that we can do to add value. Now, let's quickly look at some metrics that can help us, because and it's not a cliche, in performance management, say what gets measured gets done. So let's look at possible metrics we can consider. Please feel free to share metrics you currently consider or you think we can consider. With respect to talent acquisition, ladies and gentlemen, you may want to consider the percentage of female hires at entry level, mid-career level, and at leadership level. Okay, you may want to consider the ratio of female applicants to hires. So how many applied and what's the proportion that got selected? So you may realize that maybe, hypothetically speaking now, 50% of the applicants were women, but you will now realize that 20% of the hires are women. Are we saying that women lack the capacity to transit from application to getting hired? Or is there a bias in the recruitment process and panel? Gender representation in the interview panel. Okay, learning and development, for example, you want to look at the participation rate of women in skill building programs and leadership programs. When you are sending people to development programs, management programs, courses, what's the ratio of men to women? What's the percentage of women in leadership development program? Okay, you want to look at all this so that you pay attention to it. For example, with respect to our performance management, is there gender parity even in performance ratings across job levels? Do we have the same performance expectation? What's the percentage of women promoted across levels? So anytime we push out a promotion list, do we also want to show the ratio of men to women? What's the average time to promoting men versus the average time to promoting women? Is it the same thing? Are women paying what we call maternal penalties, prices because they are women, prices because they are mothers, while men gain fast track growth because they are not women? Our succession planning, what's the percentage of women in our succession planning pipeline for leadership role? Okay, what's the gender representation in high impact assignments and projects? All these are what? Very, very important. Okay, so let's look at our HR value chain again. We are HR professionals, colleagues. Retention rates of females, employees across job levels. Do we also, so we do employee survey, many of us do. Do we even, analyze the results by gender? What are the women saying versus what are the men saying? Or we just say employees have said. If you disaggregate the employee survey by gender, you may be shocked at the unique insights you may get looking at women feedback and men feedback. Do you understand what we are saying? That's the kind of gender prism we are saying. Okay, what's the percentage of women participating in mentorship and sponsorship programs? Okay. What's the percentage of women in our executive and in our board? What's the percentage participation rate of women in external leadership forums and certifications? These are very, very inclusive. Jane says something, I won't read it out for this context, but you can read it. She said even in a religious organization that men don't like being under the leadership of women. That's part of the socio-economic, cultural issues, because some people, from that perspective, transfer it to the workplace. Some people think women should not lead, should not be seen, should not be heard. Okay, so how do we are wrapping up now. Let's see if there are a few insights that we can still, harness in the last few slides. So you want to showcase your organization as a good place to women to work. So maybe on our career portal or platform online, do we just say this is a good place to work, or we try to sell our place to women, even maybe different from men? Because what makes a place good to work for a man may not be what makes it a good place to work for a woman. Do you want to inspire and encourage young men or girls to pursue education and career, for example, in STEM? STEM means science, technology, engineering, mathematics fields. Or is that the prerogative of boys and men only? Do you want to, for example, in this year 2025, or the year you are watching this, do you want to host an event like Bring Your Daughter to Work Day? Do you want to consider that? Maybe during their holiday, Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. All right. How do we celebrate our International Women's Day? Do you want to conduct outreach to female students at educational institutions to attract more female job candidates? Do you want to use internship programs to market technical jobs to women and highlight the company as a supportive workplace for women? Do you want to offer scholarship and mentorship programs for women, for girls, STEM degrees? Do you want to provide opportunities for female students to learn about the organization through their thesis supervision and similar programs? Do you know why we are focusing on even looking from the girl perspective? Because from the entry, there is a disproportion, especially in engineering, in STEM. So we need to, before you can hire more female engineers, you have to make sure that there are more female engineering students. And it's part of our corporate social responsibility, especially if you play in that space to do that. For example, also looking at recruiting and hiring. Do you want to target hiring practices to increase female representation? Maybe you do special recruitment for women only, in quotes, because you have way more men in the organization. Okay, do you want to do career fairs and other outreaches to recruit diverse female candidates? Do you want to conduct market research to understand barriers and opportunities for women? Do you want to focus on gender parity in hiring from internship? And so on and so forth. I've spoken around onboarding, I've spoken around training, but do you want to incorporate strategies for preventing and responding to workforce sexual harassment and gender violence? Same for performance. Do you want to provide employee assistance programs to support mental health for all women, and especially for women? Do you want to assess workplace infrastructure to see that it meets the needs of diverse employees, including women? Do we want to offer family-friendly benefits and working conditions to support work-life balance for women? Ladies and gentlemen, talent and leadership development. Do we want to promote job sharing in management roles, job shadowing for underrepresented departments for women? Do we want to create retention strategies for top female talent, particularly in technical and leadership roles? Do we want to develop a structured talent and leadership plan that include diverse women at all levels? Why am I going this granular? I don't want anybody to say I don't know what to do for women. Not after you have joined this webinar, not after you have watched this webinar. Then our succession planning and promotion want to check and ensure there are no discriminations, there are no biases against women. We want to check our corporate culture and leadership. How do we speak? How do we operate? Can women thrive truly in our organization? Policies and grievance management, even in our corporate communication and branding. When you want to put a picture about your workplace, maybe you have 15 men, 3 women. Come on. If you need to wait for all the other women to come out, so that the images about organizations should even show what? Gender balance. Ladies and gentlemen, as I wrap up this conversation from my end and open it up to input from people who want to voice out their contributions, in addition to many people who have so graciously shared their thoughts in the chat. And if you like to talk, all you need to do is please raise your hands and we'll recognize you and you can make your comments, suggestions, share your experience around this subject matter area. But I'm leaving you with this. This is just a template, it's not casting stone. But you may want to have, for example, you may want to have a 2-year plan on how to improve the gender balance in your organization. So it's not something you achieve in one day, depending on the current disproportionality between men and women in your organization. Maybe the first 1 to 3 months, you want to even review your policies and your baseline. You want to audit your existing HR policies and practices for gender equity. You want to establish a baseline through a gender diversity survey. Okay, maybe 4 to 6 months. This hypothetical, it can be faster or longer depending on the peculiarity of your organization. Leadership and accountability, you want to form a gender equity task force. You want to assign KPIs related to diversity and inclusion to senior leaders. Career advancement, you want to launch a mentorship and sponsorship program for women. Identify and train women for leadership pipelines. Psychological safety, you want to create a platform for women to share workplace challenges confidentially. Conduct bias and sensitivity training for all employees. Equal opportunities, you want to introduce transparent performance management processes. You want to implement policies for equitable pay if you don't have one. Flexibility and work-life balance, do you want to check your work-life balance policies again? Do you want to introduce child support programs? Continuous improvement. So you can have a 1-year plan, you can have a 2-year plan, you can have a 3-year plan, but you must have a plan, ladies and gentlemen. Please, it can be a 6-month plan. You must do something for women in year 2025. Let the women reach out to argue, say this is the best HR from a woman perspective. I don't care whether you are a man or a woman HR. Let them say this is the best HR from a woman perspective in the year 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to stop here and I'm checking to see if there are any hands raised. If you would like to say something, we would like to take a few contributions, comments. So we'll start with Ajoke, please. Let me see. 1 minute. Let me unmute JK. Yes.
Good evening, Dr. Adeosun. Congratulations again on your PhD and good evening, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for this session. This is a topic that is very, very close to my heart. On my LinkedIn profile, I put it there, SDG goals 5 and 10. I have a colleague who is a brilliant engineer. We get on very well together, but he told me that his daughter wanted to be a pilot and that she's a science girl, but that he discouraged her and told her to go into HR. I said, why? He said, because you know that if she's a pilot, she will not be at home. She won't be around to cook and look after the children. That was a big issue for me. And then someone like that, you realize that no matter how high he goes in the hierarchy of the organization, he's not going to work towards developing the women. So this session has done what a lot of people needed that was not done over the years. This session has given HR the template to stylishly, respectfully, and carefully begin to introduce this topic in the organizations. I would even recommend that in one of the cases that anybody is planning for this year, have a session that talks around these areas so that some of the biases and the misogynies and patriarchy that comes from our bloodlines can gradually begin to hear these things. My Gen Z did computer science. They had about 120 people in the class. They only had 11 girls. And many of those girls that have been in that class will also have parents who would have said, don't go and do that course. It's better that you do education. So it runs very deep and it affects a lot of things. So in rounding up what I want to say to women on this call that you will always pay a price, because there are times when a man can change a job that you cannot change a job because the job is close to your crèche, your children will need immunization. So you will have to pay that maternal tax. But have a plan for your career that once you get out of those early years of pregnancy, immunization, toddler, that the moment you finish that stage in your life, you hit the ground running. Have a list of courses that you need to achieve. Have a list of learnings and trainings, and have a mentor to hold your hand that even though there'll be 1 or 2, 3 years where you cannot be as active as the men, you will catch up by virtue of what you invest in yourself. That's what I want to say to the women on this call. Thank you very much for this session, sir. And thank you everybody for staying on the call.
Very, very brilliant contributions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I love that. I really, really love that. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also quickly add that please don't be part of the people that when people make it in life, you begin to say, oh, they slept their way to the top, especially if they are very fair in complexion. Please, don't be like that. Don't ever attribute a woman's progress to leadership, to anything other than their competence. Please, it's not in your place to do that. Don't say that, oh, she's fine, so she must have. No, please. It even discourages from other women from aspiring, because they say if we get to that level now, they will say we are doing something funny. Blessing, you have the floor, please. You have the floor. Please unmute and speak to us.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Good evening, everyone. Please confirm you can hear me. Okay, thank you very much.
We can hear you.
Okay, so I also wanted to mention that sometimes women are the ones who bring women down. I've had cases where a line manager is recruiting for a role, and HR has seen that, okay, this role, any person can fit into it. And then there's a woman who is doing better than the man, and then the woman, the leader is saying, this person just got engaged. I don't think it's good. This person looks pregnant. I don't think it's okay. So sometimes even women are the ones dragging women down. So I think we should help ourselves in this particular topic. Sometimes it's not even the men. In some cases too, it's even the men who have lower percentage of employees in the organization. So that's just what I want to contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sometimes we say women supporting women. Please support women. Men support women. I'll share one example in one place where I worked in the past, in the distant past. So we had a particular female colleague who used to have severe menstrual cramps. Guess the people who disturbed and tormented this woman the most? It was women. Why the men were largely understanding? Because this woman even had medical certificate from company recognized hospital to describe that sometimes 2 or 3 days or 4 days in a month, because of the severity of her cramps, she needs to stay away from work and be on medication because of severe pain. Do you know that it was women that are saying, don't we also go to the same float once in a month? Please. You see, it's also like pregnancy. There are some women, they are pregnant till the day they deliver, they are sweet as a fiddle. But some women, they may have health challenges during pregnancy. Don't say because your own pregnancy is smooth. Don't assume that all women in the world must have smooth pregnancy. Yes, that is what we wish for them. But if they don't, Don't judge their own circumstances with your own privileges. God might have just been gracious towards you. You understand? Don't now say, no, any woman, they are just lazy. They are just, especially for people who you know, for example, when they were not pregnant, how diligent and dutiful they are. Women, please be a sponsor for a woman. Men, be a sponsor for a man. Men, if you must sponsor people this year, let them be women. Or at least let more than 50% of the people you will sponsor, you would take their hands up and hold them higher in their career without any strings attached to them. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a convenient opportunity, intersection to wrap up tonight's conversation. It has been very engaging. This is something I'm very passionate about. If I've been somewhat emotive, I don't have any apologies. When you believe in something, you fight for it. If we take care of these women, our lives will be way better for it. Our nation will change for good. Our productivity will go up. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been good. Let's have some rest. Let's enjoy the rest of our day. Good night, people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
And congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And
Thank you so much, sir.
thank you for championing the he for she.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oluyemi.